You're looking at a person called Jordan Peterson, an alt media demigod. For some reason in the last few years, extremely he's extremely successful from a financial and publicity point of view. He's making dollars hand over fist on his opinions and ideas about society and why we are who we are. He's a sociologist of some kind. He has studied intensely, as he repeats often, how much he has studied. And he's a kind of person, I really find him quite fascinating and erudite and articulate in many topics that he covers. And my own sense of him is that he's going to pound this intellectual square peg into a round hole, no matter what. And what I'm capturing, I'm going to just run this for about 4 or 5 minutes. He's spent about an hour and a half on discussing the deterioration of our social fiber through an indoctrination, what is a kind of what I call culture, the culture of death. Culture is an indoctrination into a system that has never worked, will never work. And he articulates this very well through an author called Solzhenitsyn, who was a Russian author during the Stalinist Khrushchev times. He finally got out of that system. He received a Nobel Prize and he got to go to the West, but he wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago. I haven't read it. I have had small introductions to it, but as far as Jordan Peterson is concerned, it's probably one of the most pivotal literary achievements for humankind in the 20th century. It's extraordinary, and he explains it. He explains it really well. I love this explanation. But what I'm commenting on, I'm going to run this now. I'm going to do another video that I'm going to call the Nuazo God of Existence, which is a barbarian god invented by my fictitious ancestors, the barbarian Germans, the Nuazo God, the god of random. I will have a little dissertation and maybe a tertulia. I'm going to do a TNT, the News tertulia on the Nuazo God. But anyway, I'm going to capture 5 minutes. I'll stop Tom now. Okay. And he's going to talk about something that I've been going on about, and it's all been a lead into this fundamentally. He saves the most important part for the last 4 minutes, maybe on purpose. Although my sense of it is he has this fundamental understanding within himself how things get set right. But they have these type of people have elaborate intellectual formats in order to justify their existence. It's not just enough. I think there is some kind of affection, intellectuals or people that rely on thinking primarily. And there's nothing wrong. I rely on thinking all the time. We do it all the time. But does it get us out of the shitter we're in? No. No, it'll never get us out of the shitter. And now he's saying why it won't get us out of the shitter. And here's the issue. And I'm going to run this now. Listen to this. I might comment just after he said what he said.
Like another thing I've often asked my undergraduate classes is, you know, there's this idea that people have a conscience. And you know what the conscience is. It's this feeling or voice you have in your head just before you do something that you know is stupid, telling you that probably you shouldn't do that stupid thing. You don't have to listen to it, strangely enough, but you go ahead and do it anyways, and then, of course, exactly what the conscience told you was going to happen inevitably happens, so that you feel even stupider about it than you would if it happened by accident, because you know, I knew this was going to happen, I got a warning it was going to happen, and I went and did it anyways. And the funny thing, too, is that conscience operates within people, and we really don't understand what the hell that is. So you might say, well, what would happen if you abided by your conscience for 5 years or for 10 years? What sort of position might you be in? What sort of family might you have? What sort of relationship might you be able to forge? And you can be bloody sure that a relationship that's forged on the basis of who you actually are is going to be a lot stronger and more welcome than one that's forged on the basis of who you aren't.
Okay, I have to interject here. I'll let him finish off after this. But important what he said is, this is something we don't know. In his entire 1.5 hour plus lecture, he's talking about all the things that he knows. And the one thing he hasn't got a clue about, but he knows exists in each individual person, I even think beyond all the pathologies that you can list, the long list of pathologies that people are acting out, there still is underneath all that, if you're a human being, this quality of conscience. And he's now going to describe, just imagine that if this was functioning, regardless of all your brilliance and understanding and the mechanisms that function in the cosmos, all the laws that we exist within. But this one aspect to us, if this was unleashed, if this was allowed to surface in us, which obviously it isn't, for the most part, we are in the state that we're in because this has not been active. Now, this should have been the entire lecture as far as I'm concerned, and draw everything into this point. But let him go on, and he's going to tell us now how the world would be just fucking brilliant if this was actually operating.
Now, of course, that means that the person you're with has to deal with the full force of you in all your ability and your catastrophe, and that's a very, very difficult thing to negotiate. But if you do negotiate it, well, at least you have something, you have somewhere solid to stand, and you have somewhere to live. You have a real life, and it's a great basis upon which to bring children into the world, for example, because you can have an actual relationship with them instead of torturing them half to death, which is what happens in a tremendously large minority of cases.
Actually, the torture of children is called culture, the culture that we attach ourselves to. But what he's referring to, again, I'm interrupting. I wanted to run it, but I don't want to forget what I wanted to say here, is that this phenomenon that he is invoking literally is, again, at the end of his lecture for over an hour and a half, he's spending all his time of analyzing Solzhenitsyn and the despot that he was subjugated to, Stalin, in that system, how it systematically ruined an entire population of 150 or close to 200 million people. And the only thing that was required is to have some semblance of this aspect within us that he refers to as conscience, that I refer to as conscience, and it would fundamentally change everything that we experience on Earth as we understand it. Now, wouldn't that be worth an hour and a half lecture? I would say it would. No, but it's much more sexy to talk about Solzhenitsyn, and he makes great points, I have to tell you. His insight, he asserts that Solzhenitsyn Gulag Archipelago basically brought down the Soviet system. Possible, yeah. You can listen to this. I don't go along with this, although it's an interesting proposition. But this is ultimately the jewel in the crown of his lecture here. Is and you can listen to the rest of the lecture. I'll attach a link to it. It's okay. It's okay. But this is just, you know, it's beautiful what he's saying here, and kind of saying like, geez, dude, I don't really know why, but there it is.
Well, it's more than that too, because, and this is what I'll close with, and this is why I wanted to introduce Solzhenitsyn's writings to you. You see, because it isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate, it's the fate of everyone that you're networked with. And so, you know, you think, well, there's 9 billion, 7 billion people in the world. We're going to peak at about 9 billion, by the way, and then it'll decline rapidly. But 7 billion people in the world, and who are you? You're just one little dust mote among that 7 billion. And so it really doesn't matter what you do or don't.
I suppose I should say, well, how do you come up with that number? That 9 billion would be the top of the thing. And how do we know how many people exist on the planet anyway? Who would believe any of their statistics and all the things that they create in order to have us trapped in their headlights? And again, he's part of this promotion of culture, even though he's resisting it. He's part of it by saying 9 billion, and then after 9 it'll decrease rapidly and blah blah blah. Well, why makes no sense, right? But people like predicting and like hearing predictions and live by them, I guess.
But that's simply not the case. It's the wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network. Of course, that's even more true now that we have social media. You'll know 1,000 people at least over the course of your life. and they'll know 1,000 people each, and that puts you one person away from 1,000,000 and two persons away from 1,000,000,000. And so that's how you're connected. And the things you do, they're like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples move outward and they affect things in ways that you can't fully comprehend. And it means that the things that you do and that you don't do are far more important than you think.
Here he nails it. And this is what I've been saying. Within this human consciousness, there is a functioning of influence and effect. And one of them is that all our actions are so tied together with people that even though, like myself, I'm quite isolated in my activities, but I still have contact to the world in the way, the type of human being I am. And if I'm an integral human being who is honest, who lives in a way that is promoting something that works. We want things to work. I have this faith in people that fundamentally we want things to work. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to be in the clutches of this destructive, this dysfunctional force that's all around it. We want this. We desire this. So within a very short period of time, probably less than a generation, if we were able to just implement this tiny little thing that I don't know what it is, it's called conscience, yeah, I don't know, but it's there. If that was actually functioning and happening, this is what he's saying. You're two people away from knowing 1,000,000,000 people.
And so if you act that way, of course, the terror of realizing that is that it actually starts to matter what you do. And you might say, well, that's better than living a meaningless existence. It's better for it to matter. But I mean, if you really asked yourself, would you be so sure if you had the choice? I can live with no responsibility whatsoever. The price I pay is that nothing matters. Or I can reverse it and everything matters. But I have to take the responsibility that's associated with that.
I must say, I like his passion when he gets worked up. This is why I think he's found such a base, because people yearn for this commitment, this kind of feeling. And it's like, I'm still not 100% on my response. I'm still digesting a lot of his material because he is so brain oriented, mental. He's like a statistician. He comes out of a history of incredible numbers of facts that have located themselves somewhere in his being. And can he clear the slate to actually look at the world? And in his lecture, he refers to the fact that the artists, the writers, the literary, the poets, these are the people, like he refers to Dante, having revealed to us the nature of our circumstance as we are living them today, 500 years before it happened. So he has great regard and respect for the artist, and this is something I've been hammering away at too. Well, hammering away. It's like people say, oh yeah, it's a conflict of interest for you to promote yourself and say artists, yeah. I'm not saying that, like, it's very difficult to pinpoint, like a Vincent van Gogh walks amongst us, or Jesus walks amongst us and we decide to nail him on the cross, or don't worry about the fact that he is killed or kills himself, Vincent. You see, this is something that we're in this fishbowl trying to articulate. The circumstances we're in becomes very difficult. He recognizes this, and it's just a reference. He says artists have this, for some reason, have this figured out. And that could be another discussion all on its own. Let's finish it off.
It's not so obvious to me that people would take the meaningful path. Now, when you say, well, nihilists suffer dreadfully because there's no meaning in their life and they still suffer, yeah, but the advantage is they have no responsibility.
Do you see how accusatory he is? I think people like this. They like being abused by somebody like this. He's very aggressive. He accuses. He doesn't just lecture, he accuses. This is one of the things that I find quite annoying almost. You know, it's like he's talking down to people like, come on, you stupid idiots. Wake up, wake up, wake up. This is the sort of attitude behind a lot of the truther types. They want you to wake up. And he's accusing people when he talks to you. He's accusing you. He's doing this. But nonetheless, he's made a good point. I had to expose this. Finish it off now.
So that's the payoff. And I actually think that's the motivation. Say, well, I can't help being nihilistic. All my belief systems have collapsed. It's like, yeah, maybe. Maybe you just allowed them to collapse because it's a hell of a lot easier than acting them out. And the price you pay is some meaningless suffering, but you can always whine about that and people will feel sorry for you, and you have the option of taking the pathway of the martyr. So that's a pretty good deal, all things considered, especially when the when the alternative is to bear your burden properly and to live forthrightly in the world. Well, what Solzhenitsyn figured out, and so many people in the 20th century, it's not just him, even though he's the best example, is that if you live a pathological life, you pathologize your society. And if enough people do that, then it's hell. Really, really. And you can read the Gulag Archipelago if you have the fortitude to do that, and you'll see exactly what hell is like. And then you can decide if that's a place you'd like to visit, or even more importantly, if it's a place you'd like to visit and take all your family and friends.
Brilliant. Finishing it off that way, it's up to each individual to basically act their conscience, and the results would be phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. Maybe I'll leave it here. I don't need to do a face-on video on this one. I think this was just really something I'm painting, and I listened to him in the background, and he made some points, and then all of a sudden I go, what did he just say? What did he just say? Hey, all right, way to go, Jordy. Way to go, Jordy Peterson. Anyway,